Suck it out. Suck it out. Suck it out. Suck it out.
Welcome back to another episode of the Thug It Out podcast. I'm your host Farhan, and today I have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Hivansh. And just a little refresher on what this podcast is about. On the Thug It Out podcast, we discuss men's mental health and the ways in which we can navigate this issue. And we do this by talking to people of this generation of Gen Z and see how they deal with these issues and get some advice from them and give advice to them and provide a platform so that we can all improve the way that we live our lives. And so, with that, I'd like to ask you the most important question of this podcast. Havansh, have you been thugging it out? If so, why and how? And if not, why and how?
Hey, my name is Hivansh. I'm a computer science student, senior currently, and feel like I've been thugging it out my entire life as a first-gen immigrant. Feel like there's been a lot of things that I had to go through, and I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate that. So just you said you were a CS student. I assume that's one of the biggest kind of stressors that have caused you to thug it out. You said you're also a senior as well, which means you're coming to the end of your undergraduate career. And how has that situation affected the way you approach the different things in your life?
So, you know, being a CS student hasn't been the easiest, I guess. Feel like my selection of that course wasn't necessarily completely out of interest, but as a senior, I've also had the troubles of navigating what to do with my future. It feels like I was just like 17, 18 years old, and especially with the COVID that happened, I feel like I've lost the majority of experiences that I should have had that should have made helped me mature, and I honestly sometimes feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And like as you said, I feel like I am thugging it out. And right now I'm just applying to a lot of jobs. The market's tough. Applying to schools as well for masters, and hopefully, whatever happens, happens. That's just what I'm hoping for.
Hmm. And so you said that you said that do you assume that decision you made to go into CS was an informed decision, or do you feel like it was a lot of it was influenced by upperclassmen when you were in high school telling you that this industry is the industry to go for? People are making 200K plus out of undergrad and things like that. A big kind of topic or a big kind of theme of the previous episode that I recorded with someone else who's also CS was that your heart needs to be in the thing that you're dedicating your life to for the most part at least. And so how much of that do you feel applies to you?
Yeah, so yeah, I totally get what you mean. So for most of my life, um, I always knew I was gonna be like into that engineer type of space. Like I always liked math. I always liked solving puzzles. I was always like solving things. I liked figuring out how things worked and stuff. But I wasn't sure like exactly what field I went to. And I definitely feel like the wave at the time, which was computer science, and a lot of my friends, especially my best friend at that time, you know, they sort of maybe had influenced me into that, but I wouldn't say it was completely just the wave, because I was always interested in math. I always had a thing for a lot of the concepts that CS is based on. So, I don't completely see it as a waste, but I do see myself like in another timeline doing another type of engineering. So,
Hmm. Something
yeah,
like what, mechanical? I know we've spoken
yeah,
before. A big thing, a big inspiration for you is your father, right?
Yes, our father was a mechanical engineer, and the more you look into mechanical engineer, like it's pretty cool. Like, mechanical engineers do mostly anything. Like most mechanical engineers today, like they work on basically different types of fields. Like, they just have that core concept, like that core knowledge, It's not like, like a specific type of studying where, you're just limited to that. I feel like a lot of mechanical engineers I've met, like they're everywhere, they're in software, they're in like construction, they're even in the medical field, you know.
The
I
medical
feel like,
field.
yeah,
Really?
some mechanical engineers are. I mean, I guess it's because, mechanical engineering just gives you that core engineering like thinking, not
Hmm.
necessarily just like the specific concepts of it.
Okay. Yeah, I totally understand where you're going from. A lot of my friends are also mechanical engineers. It's definitely the most flexible of the engineering
Yeah,
disciplines.
it's
Yeah.
pretty broad, yeah.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to ask like about the mental headspace. Where are you at that point in time? There's a lot of stuff going on for you, college, career-wise, but what about in the other aspects of life? Friends, relationships, family, things like that.
Man, like I'd be lying to you if I told you I was good. Like, it's it's a tough time for a lot of us. I feel like the transition from high school to college, it's tough, man. Especially I know a lot of people, just haven't adjusted well. I haven't necessarily adjusted the same, I've I've gotten bad grades. I have a lot to think about. I got to think about my future. I got to think about jobs. I got to think about what I'm going to do in my future. And it's just a huge step up from the type of thinking you had in high school.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like like in high school, yeah, you got school, you got your friends, you're just thinking about what college to go to. But once you get to college, you really got to start thinking about like where you're really going to be in life. And if you don't got that figured out, it could be really stressful. So there's been days where, it's been bad. Like thinking's been bad, but I just try to keep it straightforward. Like I got to do this. I got to do this. This is what's best for me right now. And hopefully everything works out. If I'm putting my best into what I should be doing, then, you know, a lot of it does have to do with luck. But if I'm doing the best I can, then maybe things will work out.
Mm. So this type of mindset that you have, that you've cultivated, do you believe it's a kind of a byproduct of the way you've grown up and the kind of environment that you've grown up in? If you don't mind me saying like where we're kind of based, I mean, uh, we both know each other because we're from the same place, right? We're from the city, right? New York City.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
growing up, uh, do you feel like that environment, that uh hustle and bustle, grinding mindset, hustler mindset. Is that what's coming through when you're explaining these type of scenarios, by the way? Like, is that the way that you've grown up and that you've internalized kind of growing up as a New Yorker? And
I mean,
yeah, and just one more thing, if you don't mind me also adding
yeah,
on,
go ahead.
just for like the high schools we went to, both of us went to specialized high schools. And for the viewers who don't know, that's just a special school that you go to after taking an exam. And it's supposed to be more difficult, more academically rigorous, and supposed to give you more opportunities. And it definitely has. And so we've both been part of that type of environment as well, albeit slightly different. We usually went to different schools, but how much of that has also influenced this type of mindset that you've taken with you to college and life in general?
I mean, yeah, I definitely feel like New York, it's known like the hub of immigrants. Everyone, all the immigrants here come to find like a better life. Like I know, like my dad came here for work specifically, but he believed that he could give me and the rest of my family a better life. So, there was a lot of attempts to always like get up in life. Like my elementary school, yeah, sure, it wasn't nothing serious at first, but once I started like, getting good academically, my parents started to realize like, yeah, you know,
This one
he
has
had,
potential, right?
yeah, well, some like that, but when I got to middle school, my parents were pretty focused in on academics. I mean, like that's true for most immigrant parents, and like the specialized high school thing. They try to prepare me for that, and a lot of my life has been preparing for a lot of the academic standpoints, and that's just because a lot of immigrant parents do believe that academics is the way up, and
They're
I'm
not
not
really
saying,
wrong though.
yeah, they're not
Yeah.
like I'm saying 95% they are right. There are other ways, but for them, that's all there was, especially for my dad. He came from nothing, so the only thing that got him over was academics. And the way he saw it was, I have an easier path, and I definitely do. And he tried to capitalize on that, and I thank my dad for most of the things he did because he opened me up to a lot of opportunities. So whether it be middle school, high school, college, everything. So yeah, a lot of my
Yeah.
life was focused in on academics, and I tend to, you know, when I was younger, it was always like, oh, I just gotta study, I'll be good. I just gotta study, I'll be good. But as you grow up, you really start wondering like what you're learning.
Mm.
Like you really start focusing in on what exactly education can bring you. You know, once you start learning more about the world, you start taking more things in, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, you start understanding what you learn versus just, learning something and putting it into
Yeah,
your head.
exactly.
Hmm. So if you don't mind, would you like to expand on you're saying your dad came from nothing? I mean, just I understand it's like the immigrant mindset, right? Or like the immigrant situation, the immigrant environment where most of the time as first gen immigrants, your parents come to the country with pretty much nothing. But at least in my eyes, to me, your father was had some of like I don't want to say special circumstances, but slightly different circumstances. He came here as an accomplished graduate, right? And worked as a mechanical engineer here versus like me and most at least South Asian immigrants working uh kind of like odd jobs here and there, maybe like running a store or working as a in
Yeah.
like taxi services. So yeah, how do you think that has impacted the way you've grown up as well?
So I don't know much knowledge about like the different immigrant statuses, but my dad actually got extremely lucky
Mm,
based off what he's told me. So my dad actually just came from nothing, like barefoot, like slums of India, like literally had to beg his way into schools, institutions, like anything, right? The way he got into America was like by luck. Like his best
mm,
friend like submitted an application for him, and he submitted an application for his best friend. Like it was kind of crazy because like both of them didn't tell each other anything, and they were both mechanical engineers, but the way my dad got his mechanical engineering degree was through an insane amount of hardships. Like just to get into the college that he got into, he literally stood outside like the doors of like a college when he was like 17, 18 years old, and he literally just begged them every day. He slept outside their doors like for a week. And finally by like the end of the week they were just like, all right, you know, we'll take you in.
mm,
And after that, he got his education, but he had to stop his education short. Keep in mind, he's the youngest in his family. He had to stop his education short. He took the first job he could take, right? And he still tells me that's like one of his biggest regrets, that he wished he just finished his education there instead of just taking that job, but he had to take it because money was important to him at that time. And with that money, he supported his family. Being the youngest son, by the way, he wasn't even like the oldest son there. He was the youngest son. He was supporting his older brother, his older siblings, getting married, like with their education. And, when he had time, he went back to school. But with his hard work, he built a house for their family and whatever. And you know how like our community is. There's always
Mhm.
going to be like struggle for land and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, my dad didn't really get into that. Um, you know, he just did the best he could for his family, and I really appreciate him for that. But it's I I tend to go to like his interests. Like he told me like our family used to own a restaurant, and I know my dad's really into food. Like my dad loves cooking. I try to cook with him sometimes, but my dad's really funny in this, by the way. Like he'll like look up recipes and stuff, like how to cook stuff, and he'll put on a video and he'll just not follow the video and just do his own thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, my dad has a lot of interests like movies, cooking. I try to do a lot of them with him. And yeah, my dad was a huge influence on me growing up because he he really did come from nothing. And I feel like he is still immature from a lot of things
Hmm.
just because he had to grow up that much quicker,
Yeah.
if you get what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No, no, this is really, really important theme that I like that you brought up. The importance of a father figure, right? I can see already that a lot of what he's done growing up, or a lot of what he's imparted onto you, you've applied in your life. The mindset about grinding. Of course, you don't have the same circumstances of if you don't make it, what then? He
yeah.
he definitely had that in the back of his head, and it's admirable how he dealt with that and made it as far as he made it. I'd love to have him on the podcast one day, maybe, fingers crossed. But yeah, he's imparted a lot of values towards you. And another important thing is it's not just speaking about your actions or your intentions, it's also acting upon them. You said he takes his time out, I assume takes time out of his day to do these things, the activities with you, the cooking that you're talking about. It probably also inspires you to do the other things with engineering. You used to be part of an AAU basketball, so it's definitely encouraged you to do things like sports and stuff like that. And a lot of that has impacted or influenced the way you are today, right? So you're a big sports head. Um, that's the thing. I know you follow like a bunch of different sports teams and sports activities, some of which I might not particularly find uh was it fiscally responsible, but you take part in a lot of these things. So how is the way in which you involve yourselves in like hobbies and interests, how's that also work into the way you deal with life and cope with life?
So, um, speaking of sports, this might not relate directly to sports, but kind of, and also my dad. But when I was 3 years old, my dad bought me a bike, and it didn't have training wheels.
Oh, at 3,
Yeah, at three, it didn't
talk
have
about
training
throwing you
wheels.
into the fire.
Yeah, and I don't think my dad particularly knew, and I also don't think he was, that wealthy enough to buy me another bike. So he taught me how to ride that two-wheel bike when I was 3 years old. And believe it or not, like he let me fall many times. I got injured many times, but I learned how to ride that two-wheel bike by the time I was 4 years old. So my dad was, you know, it's it's always different with brown parents, you know. Like back in Bangladesh also, you know, there's always kids like playing outside. It's the same thing with India, right? There was always people like playing soccer outside. But here in America too, you know, it might not have been the same sports, but sports were always a big part of life, especially like when we grew up, you know, 2003, 2004, around that time, you know, technology, it was big, but probably not as big as it is right now. And, you know, we were still outside playing sports. And the first sport that I picked up in America was basketball. And man, I loved basketball. Like,
Yeah, back in your prime, you were something crazy, right?
yeah, like nah, like I really loved basketball. Like I started playing in like probably the second grade, and recess every day I was playing basketball. I was watching basketball. This was like I'd say like 2010, 2011. LeBron was him. Like
He still is him.
everyone watched LeBron back then. Like everyone still watches LeBron, but like back then it was like this guy's huge. And by the time I was in fifth grade, LeBron joined the Miami Heat, and I think I watched all 82 games of the Miami Heat when I was in fifth grade, and it was insane. Like I was playing ball, and eventually, you know, I played enough to get into a AAU team. I had to I had to attend church for it too. It was called Christ the King, and there's a few basketball players that came from it too. Most notably, if you know Jose Alvarado.
Nope. I
I
don't follow
mean, he's an
basketball
NBA
as well as
player,
I do.
but he played for that AAU team. So I
Mm.
had a small role in that team, but you know, I say I was decent, but I barely got time for that AAU team, and you know, after a year I was cut. But I really did enjoy basketball, and I did have to go to church for some of these teams. A lot of basketball teams had church leagues,
Mhm.
which is why I had to go to church for them as well.
Okay, so a lot. I'm happy you brought up church because a lot of just podcasts at least is for me. I like to talk about like a three-pronged approach to overall health, and so we've targeted mental health, and there's still two more. I think these three things come together to make a like overall caricature of health. So it's like physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. So since we're on that topic, where do you stand on terms of spiritual health and stuff like that? Are you religious in any way? Do you subscribe to any religious communities, things like that?
So I feel like religion, to a certain point, has a lot to do with your upbringing, and you know, you're always gonna at first lean towards, you know, what your parents believe in, what your community believes in, and you know, my parents were Buddhist, so you know, Buddhism as a religion isn't that religious in a sense, but you know, we have our own things. Like we do go to our um monasteries, we do pay respects and all that. We do practice a lot of uh teachings, readings. Um, I have learned a lot about the Buddha and stuff like that, but as far as my belief in God, you know, it's changed over time. Like I feel like as a young age, I didn't really think about it that much because, as I said, like I don't think my religion demanded that much belief. So my parents didn't really have that talk with me. Whereas, you know, if I was like Islamic or Christian, I'd be taught about God from a very young age. But, as I did grow older, my parents did tell me about my religion. And I feel like while Buddhism is a way of life, they don't necessarily say God is real, God is not real. But the more I've learned about other religions like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, it's even like just science in general. There's a lot of stuff in science where it's like you can explain it scientifically, but it's like a lot of things just had to add up, if you get what I'm saying. You know, like 100 things have to add up, it, like in line.
Well, you're saying basically the mathematical probability of something happening in this specific order is
Yeah, it's like so unlikely where there has,
something has to be guiding
yeah,
something.
where there has, yeah, yeah, you know, that kind of shows that my belief where God can be real because, these things can be explained scientifically and mathematically, but like the probability of them happening is,
Out of randomness or
yeah,
spontaneity. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, like the randomness is to the point where there kind of has to be like a third party. So, while I don't necessarily subscribe to a religion that necessarily believes in God, I don't necessarily think um I don't believe in God. Uh, I Buddhism itself it it teaches a lot of things about just living life, being human. There's going to be suffering in life, and I think following those teachings is enough. And well, it might not be enough, honestly, but your belief in God, is it's confusing, honestly, because a lot of people say just you just have to believe in God and that's enough, no matter what you do. But then there's the argument that you don't believe in God, but you're like the best person, right? You've done everything right. You've done everything in your life right. You've made all the right decisions, but the only thing is you don't believe in God. And a lot of people say that can still send you to hell if that's what you believe in. But for me, I'm not entirely sure yet, honestly. Um, I feel like I have a lot to learn, and for now, I'm just trying to be like the best person,
And so
make
you're
the right
like,
decision.
yeah, and so you basically agnostic about it and you're open to any
Yeah, yeah,
understand. Okay.
I'm open to decision, but like I said before, I feel like there has to be like a higher power, right? For a lot of these things to happen. Like they can't be just out of chance.
Mm-hmm. I'd say like one important thing that you brought up that I feel like is very important to highlight, especially in the state of the world that we live in today. A big thing that you brought up is suffering, and at least if you don't mind expanding on like as far as you know, what is how does the problem of suffering get handled in your religious view? Because if someone were to come around and say like, look at the state of the world today, there seems to be no justice, no relief, no reprieve from the terrible things that happen, either to us directly or to people we know or to people we see 5,000 miles away or on the other side of the world, things like that. You can always people can always look at those things and highlight it and say, because of that, what is the point of continuing on until we reach our timely or for some people untimely demise? So like what is the mentality that you have in regards to that? Is like do you believe that your religious views help you cope with that reality of life and just to continue moving on instead of feeling all morbid and depressed about things like that?
So what I've learned at least through Buddhism, and it's sort of my life as well, is the first step is knowing that there's going to be suffering no matter what. But when you acknowledge that suffering and you really think about it, you have this sort of perception of liberation and like wisdom that comes from it. And you could change the way you think because of the suffering. And it's like an inherent part of our human experience. It's rather than something that you escape or deny, it should be like a tool for growth and understanding. So,
Mm-hmm.
instead of being like the final thing, like, oh, at the end of the day, everything's bad, like, we're gonna suffer. The perception of suffering should be the first thing.
Mm.
It should be the first thing you think about, like, oh, we're gonna suffer no matter what. What comes after that is what can you learn about that? You know, what experience, like, what can you what can you learn from those experiences? And instead of, denying it, you have to learn from that, understand, and what you can do about that. Um, so everything is constantly just changing. Suffering, while it is painful, it's not permanent. Realizing that it will eventually fade would help you maintain hope, resilience, and this leads to like liberation in sort of a way. I'm talking purely spiritually at this point, but by confronting suffering rather than avoiding it, you can understand like the nature of desire, detachment, ignorance, which are the root causes of suffering. It's basically to like build mental strength. You gotta practice perseverance. Um, and then it just talks about a lot of Buddhism practices like meditation, ethical conduct, mindfulness, and a lot of these concepts aren't just strict to Buddhism. They could be said for any religion or just lifestyle as a whole. That's why, a lot of people say Buddhism's not even like a religion, it's more like a lifestyle. And most religions even incorporate Buddhism into them. So I feel like you just gotta accept life changes. It's part of the human condition. We can't control all external circumstances. We can't control anything that happens around us. What we can, the only thing we can control is like our reactions to them. We have to react things in a positive way. We can't always be negative about things. We have to take things and um build knowledge upon them, which all goes back to, the first step, like accepting suffering. It's gonna happen, but we have to focus away from resisting or avoiding pain, embracing it, and see what we can learn from that. And there's a lot more, but you know, I haven't I haven't learned much of it.
Mm. Okay, yeah, it seems like that's a good way to understand it, at least from coming from a um Islamic perspective that's also similar to how it works with understanding that suffering is part of the human condition. There's a bunch of ideas and philosophies about the fact that just because you believe doesn't mean you won't be tested. Like good things can happen to good people, bad things can happen to good people, bad things can happen to bad people, and good things can happen to bad people. That doesn't uh negate,
Yeah,
yeah, that doesn't negate the
exactly.
existence of something, a
Yeah,
creator, being, or
like
anything like that.
anything can happen. At the end of the day, like it's up to us to have the right reactions. We have to act, the best that we can. We can't control everything, but we can control what we can do.
And this mindset you feel is overall positive, especially the way with which you live your life. You believe it's definitely like a positive mindset to have.
You know, you can never be sure 100% that a way of thinking is the best way, right? But if you go into a thinking where you believe that what you are doing at that current moment is the best decision for you and is the best way that you can handle things, then even if you might be wrong, you'll be able to learn from it. So
All right. That's good. And then like the next conversation, honestly, I want to transition towards more of the hobbies and see how that is also we made you the person that you are today. All right, so back to, hobbies and things like that. A big thing I feel when we have discussed about things, and you know, I will not be embarrassed to admit you put me on, to One Piece, and I know anime is a big thing in our circles, at least, for I mean not just our circles, for most of our generation, older generations too, and younger ones. Anime is a large piece of media that has influenced a lot of how we think and a lot of what we think about, honestly. And there's a lot of themes that you can relate to real life, from some animes more than others. But the one that at least has impacted, I would say, you and me both the most, and it's been a long journey for me and you going through it. It's got 1,000+ chapters. Is One Piece, and before you ever put me on and stuff like that, I was always reluctant to watch it or get into it because of the 1,000+ episode barrier. That's I know a lot of people are they feel like it's a daunting uh aspect about One Piece, but you most definitely believe it's worth it. I most definitely believe it's worth it to get into all of that content and that story and stuff like that. So why did you recommend One Piece to me? And I know like one of the biggest things to me, at least, when uh when you used to talk about One Piece and give its plaudits and talk about how great it is and stuff like that, I always thought you were exaggerating when you told me you would sometimes wake up and think about like a One Piece chapter and really get you emotional, or a moment in One Piece, right? And back before I actually decided to read it, I would laugh about it and joke about it and think like it's not that deep. But after reading it, experiencing it, it really is that deep. So, do you mind expanding on like why One Piece was so great about it, and like why do you recommend it to other people? Put more people onto it.
yeah, so it's really funny you said that, but taking it back, like before One Piece, right? Like when I was growing up, I feel like our generation, we were really into books. Like I feel like you as well. Like
Book fairs,
we
the
would,
book fairs were
yeah, like
elite.
book fairs, like book fairs are crazy.
Hmm.
Like we would always ask we would never ask our parents for money, except when it was
It's a book
book fair
fair.
time. Yeah,
The new
book fair
Dire
time.
Wimpy Kid dropped, or the new
Yeah,
Captain
New
Underpants.
Dara, Wimpy Kid, Big Nate, all of
Hmm.
that, all those science fair, like
Ripley's Believe, yeah, believe it or not.
Ripley's Believe It or Not. Yeah, so that was it. That was a good time. Like Magic Treehouse,
Mhm.
at that time, fiction was huge, right? Like we would read a lot of books because, I also credit it to technology not being as big as it is
Hmm.
now.
Yeah, I feel like we're
I
the
would,
last generation before technology took over our lives. We're the first
yeah,
one to
exactly.
yeah, we're the first, we're like the bridge between
Yeah,
growing
we're the
up with it.
bridge.
Yeah. So I feel like that's an
Yeah,
important aspect
like
about Gen Z that we definitely like, has influenced the way I mean, we're gonna be kind of the uh how do I explain it? Like we're gonna be the leaders of tomorrow, right? So
exactly,
that's
yeah.
definitely an aspect
Like
of
we understand how important it is, but
hmm
we were also there before, you know, how huge it was. Like right now, like kids the age of five,
yeah,
six
Gen
have
Alpha
like
is
iPads.
cooked.
Exactly. Like, I had a phone when I was in high school. Like that's the first time I had a phone.
Yeah.
Now kids have phones at like the age of 7. But anyways, right? Like I was huge on books growing up. I would always read a book when as I was going to sleep. And it sounds crazy now, but that's really how life was back in like elementary school, middle school for us. And I was always huge into fiction. I was always huge into stories. And somewhere along the line, like in middle school, um, you know, I was never that big into anime, but my one of my friends told me to watch Naruto, and that's how I got into anime. And then Naruto was pretty good, right? And then, I just became interested into stories like I always was, because when I was reading books, like that was one of the main things I was looking for. I was looking for a good story. So I was watching all these things. I was watching shows. I was reading books. It wasn't always just fiction. Like I was reading nonfiction as well. I was reading like classic American literature, like Catch 22. I was reading, you know, Huckleberry Finn. All like I was going through like the list of the top 100 American literature, like Fahrenheit, all of that, right? I was just looking for like the best story out there. Eventually, I got into anime, started watching more anime, and like you as well, I always thought One Piece was like, you know, just that token big anime, just big for no reason. There's always this one rumor about One Piece where it's like, oh, it takes 1,000 episodes to uncover one piece, like 1,000 pieces, which is completely made up, by the way. It's not even true. So yeah, I got into One Piece, um, not expecting anything because, like everyone else, I was a disbeliever. Uh, I was watching a lot of anime back in those days, but it was a lot of the shorter ones. And like I got in, and I'm not gonna lie to you, like first 50 episodes, I was like, okay, it's all right. First 100 episodes, all right. I was like, still good. Um, Alabasta, I was like, okay, this is getting better. Skypiea, I was almost gonna drop it, right?
Yeah.
When I get to Eni's Lobby, I was like, I'll keep going. But then after that, it just took off. I think One Piece is probably the greatest story ever told.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not
Like
contesting that.
honestly, like it's probably the greatest story ever told,
Is the
right?
adventure.
It's a slow burn, but I feel like, like every show, every anime teaches like one thing, right? I feel like One Piece teaches everything in one. If you
One
get what I'm
Piece,
trying to
right?
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like One Piece is like every show combined in one.
It has like all the elements and
Yeah,
themes.
exactly. I've always been interested in media. Like I feel like media is a great expression of livelihood, our times, politics, economics, everything. And I feel like One Piece does a good representation of everything. You know, most media does a good job of representing one aspect. I feel like One Piece does a good representation of most of the aspects.
And so, what about like what of it have you seen? Like what themes of One Piece have you seen that's present? I mean, for me at least, it's definitely the freedom aspect. The flag is Jolly Roger being flown in different parts of the world, especially I know there was a I don't know how viral it was, but for us Bengalis, it was pretty big. At least there was a mural during the revolution, some of the uprising and the overthrowing of the old government, where there was a panel. Someone painted a panel from One Piece, signifying freedom from oppression and uh the change of like the bringing of a new dawn, basically the will of the some people at least theorize that that's what D means. But yeah, so you said that it's impacted you in a lot of ways, and it also has a lot of themes that you can see present in real life. So it's not just fiction in the sense that there's mythical powers and mythical
Yeah.
adventures and
So
stuff. It's just
yeah,
yeah.
like I said, like fiction is a medium to further bring about the reality of things.
Hmm.
You know, like fiction has always been used to further, that's what I find funny. Like a lot of fiction authors just use that fiction element to further bring upon like the reality of things that are happening in real life. Like a lot of things that they talk about are prevalent in our society, right?
Hmm.
They just use fiction to easier convey that theory. I feel like One Piece is important because it's honestly just everything. Like when like if you talk about like the most simplest of things, like the pursuit of dreams, like they each have a dream that they want to strive. That's like the most simplest stage one thing. Freedom, pursuit of freedom, justice and morality, like how we see how they have different forms of justice in that world and how they navigate through that, just how we have different forms of justice in our real world. And, perseverance in the face of adversity and, it's personal journeys of self-discovery. Like we have like Usopp, Sanji, and it's just, I feel like, it's just hard to convey just exactly how One Piece teaches things because it's just a lot of things,
So basically, what you're
overcoming
saying,
prejudice,
yeah. So basically, what you're
importance
saying
of
is
legacy. Yeah,
you gotta read it. So read it.
you
Yeah.
gotta read it. Gotta read it. I
Yeah.
feel like you don't really miss out much from reading it or watching it.
So yeah, and a big thing, at least that you're talking about, is media, and one form of media we've already spoken about. That's books and stuff like that. And another form of media, another form of expression that you, or like another two forms, I assume, of expression that is, been throughout human history that we've seen examples of is both art and music. And those are some of the two of the biggest things, at least for you in your life. And just to be more specific about art, it's more fashion, right? Body art, the way in which people put together pieces, design pieces to put on the human body. So then, so for however long I've known you, you're a big proponent of both music and art. So how have those two things impacted your life and the way you view the world?
Well, stepping back a little bit, I think media as a whole just plays a crucial role in conveying messages, shaping public opinion, and just influencing societal attitudes as a whole. You know,
Hmm. Yeah, we've seen that at full display over
exactly. Like
multiple different conflicts and stuff like
media
that.
as a whole is just huge, like in cultural representation, in a platform for dialogue, emotional impact, educational value, entertainment. It's huge, man. So when it comes to art, art is honestly a huge medium. I've always been interested in art. Um, Growing up, I really like drawing, and a lot of a lot of people don't know this, but I was huge into music growing up. Not just like music as a whole, but playing instruments. So I started off playing the clarinet, saxophone, flute, and by that time I was able to play most instruments, honestly. I studied music for a while, so I know how to read notes. I know how to create musical compositions. And by the time I was in fifth grade, I applied to the School of Juilliard, which is, if you don't know, it's a prestigious music institute in New York called Juilliard. And I got in, but I
Really?
didn't go. Yeah,
Oh,
I got
wow.
in for music, but I didn't go because it was pretty expensive.
Hmm.
However, I was always involved into music, and I don't know if you know what Carnegie Hall is.
Yeah, big performances happened there,
Yeah,
right? Like
big,
symphonies
big
and
performances happen in Carnegie Hall. I've performed there 2 times actually, and clarinet and saxophone. So yeah, I was pretty good to say the least in music growing up. And I don't know, I feel like it did happen when I was pretty young and I was a little immature. So as soon as, I had an instructor that I did not really like, I feel like I quit music. And it is one of my biggest regrets because I feel like I was pretty good at music, because I did do like good things at a young age, but I unfortunately quit because of a bad instructor. But it did carry out because I've always had a good eye for music, and a lot of my friends even say like I have a good ear, like have I'm able to spot like good music, good songs, and hopefully I'm able to use this later on in any career I'm in. Because I really do like music. Like I listen to a lot of music, like various genres, not just one type of genre.
mm. So what about fashion? If I recall correctly, I mean, we spoke about the influence your father has had on you growing up. This, I just want to make a little bit of a connection. It's just you said that your father kind of gave you like the technical aspect of life and technical aspect of your upbringing, where it's like he's a mechanical engineer. He's providing you with the education and stuff like that. And but I remember you telling me explicitly because I made a joke about something fashion related that your mother was the first influence when it comes to your fashion sense and why you like fashion so much. I mean, the other day I didn't know who Hedy Slimane
Hedy
Hedy
Slimane.
Slimane, yeah, I didn't even know who that was, right? And you berated me for that. You made sure to
I
let me
didn't
know.
bury you, bro.
I in your you berated me in your calm demeanor. How you do it right now.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
yeah, honestly, like my dad very technical, just because he had education growing up, but that was the only thing he had growing up. So he didn't have much in his life.
Mm.
He grew up playing outside a lot. He played a lot of sports. He told me a lot about his sports days, but other than sports, it was just education for him because that was the only way he was gonna get out. My mother, on the other hand, she was born more well off. So she always had uh, a sense of, society, how one should act towards people, how one should dress. So she always made sure that I was presentable, that I dressed well. And she taught me the fact that being presentable will get you a lot in life. So early on, she did dress me up. She dressed me up pretty well. And then when I got to the when I got to the age where I was dressing myself up, a lot of it was taken from my mother. Like I was always dressing to the best of my ability, right? Like like a lot of people like even if I wasn't wearing like the quote unquote designer or like the most expensive of things, I was still put things on in like Gap or like Abercrombie or like stuff I could find in like TJ Maxx. I could still put on outfits in that. So when it comes to a lot of the times, like in my age, when it comes to people that do have money, right? They don't necessarily dress well just because they have money, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can dress well without winning, right? Like it's the way you put on. It's not what you put on. It's the way you put it on.
Yeah, say that again. The very I know if you say it a different way, at least your special way of saying it's not, you always remind me of it. Do you mind reminding the audience of what you usually say?
I don't even know, honestly. Like,
Are you sure? Always tell me it's not what you wear, it's how you
yeah,
wear it.
it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not what you wear, it's how you wear it, right? It's I feel like clothing is always it's an idea that you represent. It's what you portray. That's why I've never found meaning in just wearing designer that just spells out designer. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Like I, I buy designer, right? But it's not for the sake of it being designer. It's because I believe in the designs and the portrayal of that designer, right? Like I don't know if I'm being clear enough, but I believe more in the portrayal of things than just the actual name.
I mean, that kind of goes into how designers even do it, like fashion designers do it, right? Don't they have their generic pieces that they give out to the, or like that they advertise to the
Exactly.
public,
A
and then
lot
they've
of
got their
exactly. A lot of designers always have two lines.
hmm
They have a fast fashion line, like let's say Fear of God.
hmm
Fear of God has essentials, which is essentially their um budget line.
yeah.
It's just their name with hoodies, sweatshirts and stuff. And then Fear of God has his main line where it's mainly their more artistic and creative stuff. And you know, I don't knock on designer brands for doing it because the truth of the matter is not just Fear of God, but many of these brands like Celine, Yves Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, they make most of their money from their fast fashion lines. They do not make a lot of money from their actual runway lines. Most of their money is coming in from their fast fashion lines. But I think it speaks more to society that, that we appreciate more of the brand names rather than the creativity itself. And I get it. Like, just because it's Balenciaga doesn't mean it should be 900. Like, you get what I'm saying, right?
hmm
The material itself is not worth 900, but I feel like there are a lot of designer items that are worth that amount because of the creativity and the design that goes into it, not because it's a name brand. I feel like every brand has two different distinction of their products. And I feel like, some of them are just going to be based on the name brand, and some of them are going to be based on the fact that a, a lot of creativity, a lot of design and material went into it.
I see. Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting though, like the way that um you feel that. I mean, this is what I kind of extrapolated from your explanation of things, is that uh, the way in which business works, the way which society works, the consumerism mindset you believe that it dampens creativity, because a lot of these, you said, a lot of these lines, these designers can always express their artistry and their vision in their different lines of clothing, and the ones that they regularly sell out, the ones that they make money off of, is not necessarily the vision that they want. It could just be like uh I don't want to say throwaway, but the generic stuff. It's not the term, avant-garde. It's not era defining or genre bending or something like that, right? And so how do you view that effect on just creativity in general? Do you think there's a loss of creativity because like as society gets more and more materialistic and uh kind of becomes a slave to the consumerism mindset that creativity just continues to get stifled? Do you see that as like a potential future?
I mean, yeah, it's like exactly what you said, like going deeper out. If you think about it more and more, it has nothing to do with fashion. It has nothing to do with economics. It has to do with society as a whole.
Hmm.
Why do people want to portray a higher status? If you get what I'm saying, right? Like a lot of these articles of clothing just become a statement of status, and it just doesn't become a thing about fashion anymore. It becomes more about a display of status, a display of like economic advantage. And fast fashion produces clothing quickly, like cheaply, right? This leads to like prior prioritize prioritization of trends over original designs, right? And before that, it just comes to people buying brands instead of clothes.
They like to let the brands control them.
Exactly, right? Like they're buying Balenciaga, not the article of clothing that Balenciaga is producing, right? If you get what I'm saying. Because society now has become consumerist controlled, where things like brands, things like clothes can become a symbol of status. So just buying something of status can prove to them something, right? Where the entire purpose of that brand should have been the fashion aspect, like the creative aspect, instead of the status aspect, right? Now, I don't blame people for that. Brands definitely have some blame to that, right? Like, I feel like brands like Balenciaga have Supreme have some role to play when it comes to knowing that they are sought after just because of the brand name rather than their creative outputs. But it ultimately comes down to the people itself too, right? And then it comes down to other people as well. Like what value do we put to these name brands? Because at the end of the day, right, there are some brands where the value is put upon the creativity, but then there are some that it's just purely just name branded. Like
Yes, yes. Yep.
you get what I'm saying, right? Like
Hmm.
there's value to the craft, and then there's value to just the name.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's a values to two different things, and it's just I mean that gives the autonomy to the consumer, right? What do you value? Do you value the trend or do you value the craft? And so like that gives the choice, and I assume that's how you treat people who buy for the brand versus yeah, like you don't want to be
Exactly.
pretentious. Yeah, you don't want to be
Yeah.
pretentious about it. Like you don't say I like fashion, so I'm gonna judge people who, buy for the brand. But it's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
yeah, what
If you don't mind, I want to share a story.
yeah, of course. Go ahead.
So if you know, like Montclair is one of the most sought after like outerwears right now, right? But Montclair was never until today, it was not that widely sought after, or was it that expensive, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. I always assumed that it
It
was.
it really, yo, Montclair was pretty cheap back in the time, right? But the owner that took over, right? He made it so that Montclair was a luxury brand. Before that owner took over, right? I think his name was Remo. He was an Italian entrepreneur, and before he took over in 2003, Montclair was like, I'm not throwing shade to any like reasonable brands like Gap or whatever, or Old Navy, but it was, to that price point, if you get what I'm saying, right? Instead of increasing the quality of the product, all he did was just increase the price. And surprisingly, it worked.
Mm.
He was selling the same product, but at luxury prices. And it worked. He revamped the product lines, he introduced collaborations, but at the heart of it, all he did was increase prices. And that caused Montclair to become like this crazy luxurious brand, when in reality, like before all this, it wasn't. And like that's why I think a lot of fashion today is the marketing aspect. But I also do think people that are into fashion do still value the creative output. Like Hedi Slimane, by the way, is viewed as one of the greatest like creative mindsets when it comes to fashion. Like, if you didn't know, this guy was in Dior. In He was a creative director of Dior in the early 2000s to like 2008, and he switched to YSL, Yves Saint Laurent, and you know how it's called Saint Laurent Paris right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that made that change. He's the reason it's called Saint Laurent Paris, and now he's at Celine. So, there's and what you see in his work from all three bands is his influence of like skinny jeans, leather jackets. There's always going to be an influence of ideas when it comes to these creative artists, right? Like that's why a lot of these brands can have like the same wear, because just like really into rock bands. By the way, I'm huge into rock, but a lot of rock bands, they always have like rotating artists. They always take like lead singers from other rock groups. They always take like drummers from rock groups, guitarists from rock groups, just like that. It's like fashion brands do the same thing. Like creative directors switch from side to side. Like Hedi Slimane jumped from like three brands. Raf Simons went from Raf Simons to Kevin Klein, just like that.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, there's a lot of even in the industry itself, it seems like there's a lot of creative freedom and flexibility as it comes with the industry itself, as it comes with like the nature of the work. And so yeah, it's just interesting to see like how much fashion has influenced you, how much you like it so much. And I just wanted to wonder like is there any type of regret that in like the back of your head, maybe in another circumstance entirely, you would be given the flexibility and ability to pursue something like music or fashion? I know you already stated that you're in computer science and were to do some other engineering if you could, you'd have no problem with it. But what about something like fashion or art? If in another world, maybe you're in a more affluent family, more wealthy situation, would you have pursued something like that? Seems like you have a lot of ideas when it comes to art, fashion, music.
Yeah, so although I am in computer science, I have a plethora of knowledge when it comes to stuff like music, fashion, and sometimes I do feel
It might have cut out. I'm not sure.
alright, so although I do feel that I'm inclined to computer science, I do have a plethora of interests when it comes to stuff like fashion and music. And, sometimes I do feel like I could go into those fields. Like when it comes to fashion, it offers me an expression to who I am, how I feel, my values. The way I dress can reflect my personality. It can help me stand out in a world full of trends, whether it's like the modern designs or, something from years ago. Fashion is something that can be a canvas for my individuality. And I have a lot of inspiration from designers. So I'm into a lot of brands, Japanese, Italian, American. Um, a lot of them influenced from music, like Number Nine has a one of my favorite brands has a lot of experience from inspiration from music as well as Undercover, which is inspiration from music as well as modern trends. And I appreciate the creativity in their design. There's a story to be told in every design, every collection. And I feel like dressing in a particular way is helpful in expressing yourself as well as conveying who you truly are, right? And fashion is truly an art form. If you're drive to the creative side of fashion, you can find it influential in how you approach problem solving or innovation in other areas of life. Fashion encourages like thinking outside of the box, experimenting with colors, shapes, materials, and this type of thinking even, you know, encourages me to think about this in other fields like design, engineering, data analytics, and I'm influenced a lot by the blending of fashion with function, functionality. Um, there's a lot of brands that approach stylish outerwear with practical performance, innovation with aesthetics, and this goes a lot into engineering and my interest in cutting edge designs, and the main thing that interests me about fashion is cultural representation, like fashion in different cultures is portrayed in a different way. Like me as an Indian, fashion in India is portrayed in the way that Indians dress themselves, like in saris and those coats. And this finds me a way to connect with my specific culture. And this is similar to how fashion communities as a whole navigate through social statuses, environmental consciousness. And, at the end of the day, right, like what my mom told me, dressing is always important because it boosts my personal confidence, right? If I'm dressed a certain way, I'm able to approach my day with significantly higher self-esteem. While this might not be true for most people, right?
All right, so like a lot of interesting things were said about fashion and the things that it does for you in your life, and it's very, very, very insightful into it's a very gave a lot of insight into kind of how Hivansh operates, how the you go about your life when it comes to creative the impact of creativity and flexibility and things like that in fashion and art and music. And so like with that, I'd like to introduce the final segment, which involves any showcases of any projects or um anything that you're working on at the moment, just to give you a platform for that, a platform for any guests, to be honest, and any like advice that you'd like to give to the audience in regards to everything that we've talked about. Any like final remarks and stuff like that.
So when it comes to projects, they're all going to be like CS related, but a lot of them I try to incorporate it into my interests. So, I have one project where I try to make like a clone of my anime list, but a lot of them are just centered around data science, machine learning, databases. I'm more into that type of stuff, so I'll just make generic projects in computer science and web development. Like the most generic projects are about like CRM, which is like, you know, management of like data and like a database. And what I do is just add AI to it. So one of the projects that I made was like a pantry where you could add objects to the pantry, like what ingredients you have in the house. You know, it would just update in the website, like, oh, you have this ingredient, this amount of the ingredient. But then I incorporated AI in the way that it would generate images for that ingredient. And then there was a button you could press to calculate like or generate a recipe based on the ingredients that you have. So most of my projects, right, have just been more generally related to web development and introduction to data science. But then I've added AI projects because I have a lot of mentors and uncles in software engineering, right? And most of my uncles are in this field, and they've told me that this field is pretty much packed. Like it's really hard to get a job in this field. And there's been a lot of layoffs recently. Like one of my uncles, he's in Microsoft, and he told me like Microsoft's just recently done a huge layoff because they want a lot of AI engineers. And so has Uber, so has Citibank. Like a lot of these companies have relied on AI now. So they're releasing a lot of their current employees and they just want a lot of young talent in AI, which is why, like I've done projects in AI. But it really speaks on things like how people are always just like, oh, AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. AI is going to, take away the entire computer science industry. But, if you look into history, right, like every new technology has replaced specific jobs, but it's always created new jobs, right? Like the creation of the telephone, creation of like steel, like the steel industry has taken away a lot of jobs, but it's also made a lot of jobs, right? Like I feel like this is it's a similar case here, right? It's obviously going to take a lot of the entry level software jobs away. Like Zuckerberg said like 4 years ago, AI is going to take a lot of like the mid level software engineering jobs, but this is also going to create new jobs. So I'm hopeful in AI engineering in the future, but it is unpredictable at this time. So I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah. And any like overall advice for anybody in your major since you're a senior, you're seeing a lot of things, done a lot of things in your undergraduate career. And if you could do things differently, right, what would what type of advice would you give to those who are pursuing a similar uh career as you or similar undergraduate track as you?
Well, when it comes to my undergraduate track, right, computer science in general, I feel like I only have one thing to say is just be on track of trends. Um, that's like I feel like that's the number one advice I've gotten, and it's just true for most people. Like, most computer science hires, they only like they tend to take young people for a reason, you know. It's easier to teach them these new skills, and there's always new technologies that are evolving, so you just have to learn new technologies. But, that's the most I could tell my computer science peers. Like, you just have to learn the new technologies because this field is evolving literally every month, every day. But to everyone overall, there's a lot more I could tell you. Like, you have to embrace failure. Failure isn't the end. I've had a lot of failures in my part of the journey, but you have to understand that what happened because of the failure, like it brings invaluable lessons that you could learn through the experience, and it's life changing because this perspective frees you from the fear of failure. Once you experience this like large failure once, you're allowed to take these risks that you can pursue bold ideas and push past your comfort zone. And I really feel that's important for you developing as a human, right? And you have to prioritize your mental and emotional health as a part of it, but you have to focus on what you can control, right? Like life can be overwhelming when you try to control everything. But the key is to focus only on what you control, right? There can be things that happen, right? Every like a lot of things that can happen that can seem not right, that can ruin your day. You know, you don't get into the school you want to, you don't get into the job you want to, you don't get into the situation you want to, right? But at the end of the day, it's your actions, your responses, your mindset that you can control, right? A lot of outside factors you can't control. But if you can control what you do, you can make it pretty likely that you get what you want, right? And a lot of the times it might not be right away. You might not get what you want always, but when you do, when you do take control of your actions, there can be that chance you improve your chances, right? Like I always say, right? Like just one instance that my dad taught me was if you stand below like pigeon's nest, right? A lot of pigeons are there. You stand below that nest, you're guaranteed to get shit on. But you position yourself beneath that nest, right? You can always position yourself to be in a greater position, right? Like luck and unluckiness is always going to be a random factor, but you can always position yourself to be in a greater position, right? Like things might not always pan out to your way, but you can control what way you can be. This may help you feel less helpless in difficult situation, and by focusing on what you can control, you gain a sense of agency, empowerment, and this may increase confidence and reduce anxiety, right? And another advice that I have is building relationships, right? I'm a very shy person, right? I A lot of times when my parents invite even relatives over, I tend to get shy. I tend to avoid these I tended to avoid these interactions, but I learned over time that these relationships are very important, and a lot of these people are going to inspire me, they're going to challenge me, they're going to support me, and that positive relationships with anyone, not just my closest family members, but just anyone around me is very important. And these relationships can support you during tough times. They can offer you different perspectives. Like sometimes you just need to go out. You just need to like ask people like what they've done in life, what like what they have learned, and a lot of the times these older people will provide you with genuine perspectives that can really be helpful, right? And last of all, like you need to pursue what truly makes you happy. Like at the end of the day, life is short, and people do get caught in the pursuit of these societal expectations or the pursuit of others, and they really just need to take time to discover what truly makes them happy. And when you align your work, action, and energy with your core values and everything else, you have a deep sense of purpose, right? You need to accept this change and embrace uncertainty. And really, on top of it all, like on top of it all, you need to find meaning beyond material success, which is the main thing I've learned in my religion, right? Like you can do all of these things, like pursuing what makes you happy, building relationships, focusing on your work. But while success, money, and status are seen as key markers of achievement, true fulfillment can come from just finding purpose and meaning in life. You just have to engage in activities that align with your values and what you believe could contribute to the greater good and helping others, right? Like if you shift your priorities and lead to a deeper connection with others, it could lead to a life that is richer beyond just possessions. And what I always grew up with, right, was a crea a curiosity with learning. So I always thought that you need to learn no matter what. And this goes back to like anything. Like when I was young, I was always like questioning everything. And even when it came to religion, like as I told you, I was playing basketball, I was going to church, but I had Muslim friends, I was reading the Quran. No matter how much you think you know, right? Curiosity is always going to be like the foundation of growth and innovation. Like whether you're reading, like I was reading books and stuff as well. Like I wasn't traveling that much, but I wish to travel later in the future and learn more. But engaging with new people, like there was a lot of times I was put into situations where I was always with professionals and I would always ask them questions, right? And like even if I didn't know like what they were talking about, like I would ask them about computer science, philosophy, law, anything. And they would talk about things that I didn't even know about, right? and I would just ask them further questions, try to understand it, ask for further resources, right? I feel like the more you know about stuff, the better you can live, no matter what it has to do with what you're currently doing. You just need to challenge yourself intellectually, emotionally, and even spiritually. And last of all, I think you just need to believe in yourself. You need to take risks to achieve your goals, right? You shouldn't you shouldn't want to not step out of your comfort zone. And yeah, I I think you should just want to pursue your passions no matter what they are.
All right, yeah, that was wonderful advice, eloquently put. There's a lot of good advice there too. Um, yeah, I hope the audience can take a lot of that, internalize it, and understand it, and little by little, just reduce the amount of people in the population that are thugging it out. Even though that's the name of this podcast, it's not definitely not a mindset or lifestyle that I'd advocate for, bottling everything up and hoping things will work
Yeah,
out in the end. You
yeah,
definitely
I
have to
agree.
work. Yeah, you definitely have to work for it, work towards it. Everything that Hivansh said, is you got to put your mind to it and get it out there. And obviously, it's not just staying in your comfort zone and uh attacking the world for what it is, but rather attack the putting a plan in place and going out there and changing your circumstance. And so this I feel like this is a good way to end it. You know, this is a great conversation. A lot of things were said. It was a good dive into the mind of Hivansh. Once again, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. It was a wonderful conversation. And I appreciate everything that you kind of laid out on this podcast.
Yeah,
Uh,
no problem.
Yep, and also I'll put like some links for things of interest, maybe like anything like Hivansh wants me to put, probably like yeah, maybe if you had a GitHub or something like that, I'll everything will be in the video later on. And also, if you ever want to reach out to him, I'll have his modes of communication, the ones that he gives me. And otherwise, like, comment, and subscribe, and there'll be more videos, more guests. Uh, Message me on IG if you want to be part of this as well. I give my platform to anybody. And once again, thank you so much to our guests, and thank you for watching.